There is a moment that arrives in the life of certain women, and almost no one sees it happen. It does not announce itself. No door slams, no voice rises. Something simply stops, the way a long rain stops in the middle of the night, and you only notice the silence in the morning. Tonight, I want to speak about that silence, about what shifts in a woman when she stops bending her words into shapes that other people can swallow more easily. Carl Jung would have called this a quiet realignment of the soul, a turning of the inner axis that the outer world will feel long before it understands. Picture a woman seated near a window, late evening, the lamp behind her, throwing a soft circle of light onto the wood of the table. Across from her, a man waits. He waits for the familiar music to begin, the careful explanation, the gentle defense, the slow, patient unfolding of her reasons, offered the way one offers a cup of tea to calm a guest. For years, this has been their rhythm. She speaks, he weighs, she adjusts, he softens, and the evening is saved. Yet tonight, the music does not begin. She looks at him, she does not look away, and she does not lean forward. There is no plea hidden behind her eyes. Something in her has simply gone home, to a place inside her that he cannot enter without being invited. And tonight, she has not extended the invitation. Have you ever noticed that the person explaining themselves is always, in some invisible way, standing slightly below the person listening? It is almost a law of the inner world, as quiet and as exact as gravity. Whoever speaks to be understood places a small crown on the head of the one who listens. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. It is the natural physics of the psyche. When you justify yourself, you are sending a message far older than the words you are using. And that message says, your gaze decides whether I can rest tonight. For years, perhaps, you believed that one more sentence, one finer nuance, one cleaner phrasing would finally bridge the distance. You polished your truth like a stone in your palm, hoping that if it became smooth enough, the other would finally pick it up and hold it. But the stone never quite arrived. Every additional explanation, without your knowing, was confirming the very thing that wounded you, that his perception of you had become the courtroom in which your life was being tried. And one only pleads in a courtroom where the judge sits higher. Jung observed something striking about the human psyche. The unconscious listens past the words. It hears the posture beneath the sentence, the breath beneath the breath, the small tremor of need woven into ordinary speech. A woman who explains herself, even with eloquence, even with intelligence, transmits a signal far louder than her vocabulary. She is saying, without saying, that the other person's reading of her is more authoritative than her own knowing of herself. And no man, however loving, however thoughtful, can stand for long inside that imbalance without quietly beginning to believe it. He does not even choose to believe it. The unconscious arranges the chairs in the room without consulting anyone. There is, in the old stories, a figure that keeps returning across centuries and across cultures, the woman who does not explain. You find her in the tales gathered by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, in the wild myths that survived the burnings, in the grandmother who looks at you over her cup of tea and says nothing, and somehow you understand more than if she had spoken for an hour. This woman is not cold, she is not hardened, she is inhabited. She has met something inside herself that no longer requires translation. Her silences are not walls built against the world. They are deep waters in which she stands, untroubled by the small storms passing over the surface. And here is what is strange. Men feel this woman. They do not always have language for what they feel, but their nervous systems register her presence, the way an animal registers a change in the weather. Something in her does not orbit them. Something in her belongs entirely to herself, and that small, sovereign region inside her becomes the most magnetic thing in the room. It draws, it unsettles, it awakens, because everyone, deep down, longs to encounter a presence that is not begging for their approval. Now, Let us go gently into the heart of this. What happens exactly inside a man when a woman stops explaining herself to him? For a long time, he has been seated in a comfortable chair, the chair of the one who receives the offering. He did not build that chair. She offered it to him, sentence by sentence, year by year, every time she rephrased her feelings to make them easier for him to digest. And suddenly, the offerings stop. The chair remains, but it is no longer being polished by her devotion to being understood. He shifts in it, he grows restless, he begins, almost without noticing, to wonder what she is thinking. Notice the reversal. For years, she was the one wondering what he thought of her. Now, in the silence she has chosen, he is the one leaning forward, scanning her face, trying to read the weather inside her. This is not a victory. This is not revenge. This is simply what happens when one person stops carrying both ends of an invisible rope, and the rope falls naturally toward the side that was always meant to hold it. And I want to pause here, because there is a real danger at this point in the journey, and I would be unfair to you if I did not name it. Many women, upon discovering this dynamic, mistake it for a weapon. They go silent in order to punish. They withhold in order to make the other regret. They build their quiet like a fortress aimed at the heart of someone who hurt them. But that is not what we are speaking about tonight. A silence that punishes is still a silence that performs. It is still turned toward the other. It is still asking, in a hidden voice, "Please notice that I am withholding." And the unconscious of the other notices, of course, but it does not surrender to that. It hardens, it defends, sometimes it leaves. The silence that changes everything is of a completely different nature. It is the silence of a woman who has nothing left to prove, not because she has given up, but because she has simply realized that the recognition she was reaching for cannot be negotiated. You cannot argue someone into seeing you. You cannot explain your way into being loved by a heart that is not ready. And the moment a woman fully accepts this, something inside her relaxes that had been clenched for decades. Imagine her, this woman, sitting alone one morning with her coffee, the window open just enough to let the cold autumn air find her face. She is not crying, she is not raging, she is simply realizing, with a quiet, almost tender sadness, that the people who needed so many explanations from her were never going to truly meet her, and the ones who could meet her never asked for the explanations in the first place. A whole architecture of effort collapses gently in her chest. What remains afterward is something close to peace, though it has the weight of a small grief inside it. And if these words are finding you tonight, if some part of you is leaning closer to the screen without knowing why, I want to invite you, gently, to stay with me on this channel. Not because I have answers for you. You already carry the answers, beneath layers you have been told for too long to keep undisturbed. But sometimes, hearing certain things spoken aloud, in a certain tone, at a certain hour of your life, helps a buried knowing rise back toward the surface. If you sense that what we are exploring here belongs to your own unfolding, consider subscribing, quietly, the way one slips a bookmark into a chapter one wants to return to. We will go further together, slowly, the way real transformation always moves. Now, let us return to the woman at her window, because something important is still unfolding in her. In the language of Jung, what is happening to her is a movement of individuation. She is no longer letting her sense of self be assembled in the workshop of someone else's gaze. For most of her life, she was building her identity the way one builds a house, brick by brick, with the bricks being approval, recognition, validation, the steady reassurance of being seen correctly. And then, one day, she noticed the house was not hers. It had been built for visitors. It had been arranged to please the people walking past. The rooms she actually lived in were small, neglected, hidden behind the public corridors of her own personality. She begins, slowly, to walk back into those hidden rooms. She finds dust there. She finds old letters she wrote to herself and never sent. She finds longings she had labeled unreasonable and shoved beneath the bed. She finds also a kind of light, faint but undeniable, coming from a corner of herself she had almost forgotten how to enter. This light is what Jung might have called the self, that deeper center beneath the ego, the part of her that was never seeking approval because it was never separate enough from existence to need it. And here is where the magic, if we may use that word, begins. Because as she settles back into this inner home, the people around her start to feel the change long before they can name it. The man across from her at dinner suddenly cannot quite predict her. A friend who used to lean on her endless emotional translations finds the translations have stopped arriving. A family member who was used to her quick apologies finds, instead, a soft, unmoving presence that neither attacks nor concedes. None of these people receive a memo. There is no announcement. There is only the unmistakable feeling that something inside her has reorganized and that the old choreography no longer works. Some of them will sense this and rise to meet her. They will discover, perhaps for the first time, the woman beneath the performance, and they will love her more truly than before. Others will not. They will grow agitated. They will test the new silence with small provocations, hoping to draw her back into the familiar pattern of explanation. And when she does not return, they may grieve, or rage, or quietly drift. This is the cost. It is real. It would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. A woman who stops justifying herself loses something, and what she loses is the version of her life that was built on her own self-erasure. What she gains is harder to describe, because it does not announce itself in events. It announces itself in the quality of her mornings, in the way she meets her own eyes in the mirror, in the long, slow exhale she gives when she realizes she has not, all day, contorted herself into a shape designed for someone else's comfort. There is a kind of dignity that returns to the body when the mouth stops apologizing for the soul. And men, the ones capable of growth, the ones whose own inner work is not entirely abandoned, will sense this dignity and feel something stir in them that is older than desire. Jung wrote about the anima, the inner feminine figure that lives inside every man, often unconsciously, shaping who he is drawn to and who he flees from. The anima, in her deepest form, is not the woman who explains herself. She is the woman who carries mystery the way a river carries the moon, without needing to comment on either. When a man encounters this presence in waking life, something within him bows, even if his outer personality does not yet understand the bow. He may resist, he may project, he may struggle, but the bow has already happened in the basement of his psyche, and from that moment forward, the relationship is on different terms. I want to offer you an image to carry from this evening, because the unconscious learns more from images than from arguments. Picture a river that for years has been posing at every stone in its path. At each rock, the river slows, gathers itself, and begins to explain its course. It tries to convince the stone that it has the right to flow. It negotiates its own passage. It grows thin in argumentation, fragmenting into 100 little justifying streams. And then, one day, almost without ceremony, the river remembers what it is. It is water. Water does not ask permission of stone. It simply continues, with that patient, liquid certainty that has shaped every canyon on this earth. The stone does not vanish. The stone is not destroyed. But the stone, now, must reckon with a force that has stopped explaining itself, and that reckoning is what changes the landscape between them forever. Notice that there is no violence in this image. The river is not at war with the stone. It carries no grudge. It does not even particularly notice the stone, because it has remembered something more important, which is its own direction. This, I believe, is the deepest secret of what we are exploring tonight. A woman does not reclaim her power by fighting for it. She reclaims it by remembering that it was never elsewhere to begin with. The years of explanation were not, in some sense, mistakes. They were the long apprenticeship in which she learned, by exhaustion, what could never be obtained through that path. And so I want to leave you, tonight, with a question rather than a conclusion. Where, in your own life, are you still standing in a courtroom that was never legitimate, defending a self that needs no defense? Whose verdict are you still waiting for before you allow yourself to inhabit your own skin without apology? Sit with that, gently, without rushing toward an answer. The answer, if it comes, will not arrive as a sentence. It will arrive as a small, quiet loosening, somewhere behind your ribs, the kind that signals an old contract is finally being torn up. And when that happens, you will not need to announce it. You will not need to explain it. You will simply notice, one ordinary morning, that the woman in the mirror is looking back at you without asking anyone, anywhere, for permission to exist. If something in this exploration has touched a place in you that has been waiting a long time to be touched, I would love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Not as proof, not as performance, simply as a way of meeting one another in this strange, beautiful work of becoming who we already are. Take care of that sovereign part of you. She is older than any voice that ever tried to quiet her. And she has been waiting, patiently, for you to finally come home.